I'm Rachel.
Deckard.
Did you know Sean Young once walked into the Warner Brothers lot wearing a homemade Catwoman suit to try and win a role she was never even cast in? Some call it bold, others delusional, but one thing was certain. By the early 90s, Sean Young had gone from Hollywood's next big thing to tabloid punchline. She starred in Blade Runner, she held her own opposite Kevin Costner in No Way Out. She was poised to be a major force in the industry. And then it just fell apart. Was it bad luck, studio politics, or something deeper? Whatever the reason, Sean Young's career crashed harder than anyone expected, and Hollywood never quite forgave her. So, what the hell happened? Let's fade to black. Sean Young was born Mary Sean Young on November 20th, 1959 in Louisville, Kentucky. Her father worked as a TV producer and journalist. Her mother was a screenwriter and PR executive. It wasn't a typical Hollywood upbringing, but stories were part of her life from day one. As a teenager, she trained at the Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan, with a focus on classical ballet. Back then, she was more concerned with timing, precision, and movement than with movie stardom. Her path seemed to be headed toward the stage, not the screen. After graduating, she enrolled at the School of American Ballet in New York, but eventually, the pull toward acting became too strong to ignore. She started modelling to pay the bills, and before long, she was landing auditions. There was something about her, not just the look, but a kind of confidence that came off as sharp and unpredictable. And in 1980, she made her film debut in Jane Austen in Manhattan. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was enough to get her in the room, and the very next year she landed a small part in a hit comedy that changed everything for her. Her first real brush with the big leagues came in 1981's Stripes. It's one of those classic screwball comedies from the early 80s. Loud, chaotic, packed with charm. Bill Murray leads the charge, alongside Harold Ramis, John Candy, Warren Oates, Judge Reinhold, even a young John Larroquette in full sleazeball mode. This was a film made by guys who knew how to walk the line between irreverence and insanity, and it was a hit. Sean Young plays MP Lewis Cooper opposite PJ Soles as the other love interest. And yeah, the role's small, but she holds her own in a film dominated by loud male energy. She had this easy, relaxed presence, a softness that contrasted with the absurdity around her. She had great on-screen chemistry with Ramis, and even in those few scenes, you could see something flickering behind the eyes, like she was taking it all in, sizing up the industry. This wasn't just a pretty face doing the rom-com background routine. It was a tight shoot, a little messy at times, but full of energy, and by all accounts, Sean Young fit in well with the cast. She wasn't the star, not yet, but she was learning, and she was getting noticed. The film was a box office success, pulling in over $85 million on a modest $10 million budget. Critics mostly embraced it too. Roger Ebert called it an appealing, raggedy comedy, and praised Murray's deadpan charisma. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. Stripes found its audience fast, and over time it became a fan favourite. She's in the mix of all these future comedy icons, holding her own with very little screen time, and that's not easy to do. Looking back, Stripes wasn't just a breakout for the guys, it was the beginning of something for Sean Young too. If Stripes got her in the door, then Blade Runner slammed it wide open. In 1982, Sean Young starred opposite Harrison Ford in Ridley Scott's dystopian noir masterpiece, a film that didn't just redefine science fiction, it reshaped what it looked like. And I'll hold my hand up, this is one of my most beloved movies of all time. It's one of those VHS tapes that barely survived the 80s in my house. Everything about it, the Vangelis score, the lighting, the world building, the sound design, it's just hypnotic. And the performances, they're all off the scale. So seeing Sean Young pop up in this after Stripes really stopped me in my tracks. She couldn't have been more different. Gone was the easy, casual charm. Here she was restrained and deliberate, enigmatic. She played Rachel like someone walking a tightrope over their own identity, calm on the surface but with something fragile always just lurking beneath. It wasn't a loud performance, it wasn't showy at all. I suppose that was the point. She didn't play Rachel like a typical Hollywood leading lady, she played her like someone trying desperately to hold herself together. Even if Blade Runner wasn't a smash hit at the time, it was polarizing and underperformed at the box office. Critics took notice of Young's performance though, and over time, as the film became a cult classic and one of the most revered sci-fi films of all time, so did her role. But behind the scenes, things weren't quite so cinematic. There were reports of tension on set between Young and Harrison Ford. Some claimed their chemistry on screen didn't match their relationship off it. And while Ridley Scott praised her look and screen presence, there were rumblings that she was, difficult. It's hard to separate the mythology from the truth though, but this was the start of something that would follow Sean Young for the rest of her career. After Blade Runner, you'd think the momentum would carry, and on paper it did. In 1984, Sean Young signed on for another massive sci-fi epic, this time with David Lynch at the helm. The film was Dune, adapted from Frank Herbert's notoriously dense novel, and it had all the markings of a career-defining event. A sprawling cast, a huge budget, and a massive fanbase behind it. Sean played Chani, the Fremen love interest of Paul Atreides, played by a young Kyle MacLachlan in his film debut. Her role was important in the book, but in the film, it ended up being heavily condensed, a background presence more than a fully developed character. Now, I'll be honest, I have a real soft spot for this one. This was part of that little golden patch in the early 80s when studios were swinging for the fences with sci-fi. You had wild world building, strange tone, beautiful scores, and Dune was right in the middle of that moment. Sean doesn't get much screen time, but she made an impression. The problem was that Dune just didn't land. The production was chaotic, the story got butchered in the edit, and the final cut felt like a collection of beautiful ideas without enough glue to hold them together. Critics pounced on it, calling it bloated, confusing, and borderline incoherent. Lynch disowned it, the studio lost money, and the sci-fi crowd was split right down the middle. And once again, Sean Young was part of something ambitious, but ultimately flawed. This was her second major sci-fi project in a row, and both had stumbled commercially, even if they became favourites later. But then came a turn, a shift from sandworms and space politics to something far more grounded, a slick political thriller, a leading role, and a chance to show a side of Sean Young Hollywood hadn't seen yet. In 1987, Sean Young finally got a role that let her step out of the shadows. No sci-fi world building, no artificial mystery, just a taut, high-stakes political thriller, and she was right at the centre of it. No Way Out paired her with Kevin Costner, who was on the verge of becoming a major star himself. She played Susan Atwell, a woman caught in a deadly love triangle with a high-ranking government official and a naval officer. It was the kind of role that could have gone one of two ways: flat, femme fatale cliché, or something more. Sean Young made it more. She had real chemistry with Costner, and for once she was allowed to show range. Vulnerability, danger, confidence, chaos, sometimes all in the same scene. Critics really praised her performance. The New York Times called it a bold, sexy performance that electrifies the first act. Audiences responded too. No Way Out was a box office hit, and her face was suddenly everywhere again. And for a moment it looked like this was the turning point. The breakout moment that would finally move her into that next tier of leading actresses. Looking back at this early part of her career, you've got to say, she must have had one hell of an agent. Because Stripes, Blade Runner, Dune, No Way Out, that's a pretty phenomenal run by anyone's standards. From the outside, it looked like Sean Young had finally arrived. But Hollywood has a habit of turning the volume down just as you're hitting your stride, and behind closed doors, the whispers had already started. She even turned up briefly in Wall Street. Blink and you'll miss it, but that was no small thing. This was Oliver Stone coming straight off Platoon, riding a wave of awards and acclaim. The film was packed with heavyweight talent, and the fact that Young was cast, even in a minor role, just underscored how in demand she was during that late 80s run. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and want to help support the channel, you can now buy me a coffee. It helps keep these retrospectives going and lets me keep shining a light on actors Hollywood tends to forget. You'll find the link down in the description below. Cheers. Back to the video. After No Way Out, Sean Young seemed poised for new opportunities. Some of the biggest franchises, the biggest roles, she looked like she had the pieces lined up. One of the first was Batman in 1989. According to multiple accounts, Young had been cast as Vicky Vale and participated in weeks of read-throughs and rehearsals. Then came the accident. During horseback riding exercises in pre-production, she reportedly fell and broke her arm, or collarbone depending on who you ask. Because of the injury, Sean Young was replaced by Kim Basinger, and her shot at a major studio blockbuster quietly slipped away. But she wasn't done with Gotham just yet. When Batman Returns rolled around, she was still in the mix, and this time she had her sights set on Catwoman. According to press reports and her own recollections, she even showed up at the Warner Brothers lot in a homemade Catwoman costume, asking to be seen by Tim Burton or someone in casting. Some accounts claim she tried to enter production offices uninvited, others say she caught execs completely off guard. Whether or not Burton literally hid under his desk, as some stories suggest, the incident quickly became part of Hollywood lore. And for Sean Young, it was deadly serious. Most actors would have played it safe and let their agent make the call, maybe send over a headshot. She didn't get the part. Michelle Pfeiffer did, and delivered one of the most iconic performances of the decade. But Sean Young didn't fade out, she just became a lot harder to cast. The Catwoman stunt became a reference point in every conversation about her. People stopped talking about her performances and started talking about her behaviour, and that's when the difficult label really started to stick. Maybe it wasn't fair, maybe it wasn't even accurate, but in 90s Hollywood, that was often all it took to change everything. Then came Ace Ventura: Pet Detective in 1994, a huge box office hit, Jim Carrey at the peak of his chaos. Sean Young played Lieutenant Louis Einhorn, a character who's revealed in the film's climax to be a man in disguise. And the way it's handled, well, I don't know. Some people would say it hasn't aged that well, but I still think it's hilarious. The film goes for big, crass laughs, and Young becomes the target of the joke rather than part of the comedy. The reaction? Well, the movie made money, but Sean's stock didn't go up with it. In fact, the opposite happened. And all the while, the press kept circling back to the same story: the Catwoman costume, the label of unstable, and anecdotes from directors or producers that painted her as hard to work with. Sometimes it was vague, sometimes it was just mean. Sean Young said herself, "What I didn't know in my early career was very good self-preservation skills. I didn't know how to censor myself at all." And that lack of self-censorship ultimately cost her. The 2000s were quieter, at least in terms of major studio roles. She popped up in unexpected places: The Young and the Restless, a guest spot on Reno 911, and blink and you'll miss it appearances in quirky indies and low-budget thrillers. Her face had changed a little with time, but the spark, that slightly off-kilter energy, was still there. Then came celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew in 2011. And boy, was it hard to watch. The show framed her at times as delusional or detached from reality, but if you look past the editing and the sensationalism, what you saw was a woman trying to claw her way back, trying to be heard, trying to be understood in an industry that had chewed her up and spat her out. In Jugface in 2013, she gave a small but chilling performance. There was no big Oscar campaign, no magazine covers declaring a resurrection, but there was work. And for an actor like Sean Young, who had become a kind of industry cautionary tale, that in itself said something. If you listen to her in interviews today, there's a sense of peace in her voice, a woman who's been through the storm and come out the other side with a few scars, sure, but also with a sense of humour still intact. We remember the roles: Rachel in Blade Runner, Chani in Dune, Susan in No Way Out, but we also remember the what-ifs. What if she'd played Catwoman? What if she'd been given more chances, more space to evolve? These days, Sean Young lives a quieter life. She's married, she's a mother, and she still turns up in the occasional indie or festival circuit project. She's had a whirlwind of a career, stormy, unpredictable, and at times unforgiving, but we can hardly say it's been boring. I mean, what a ride. Let's hope she's found some peace away from the industry and all the noise of the press. I release 2 new videos a week, so if you like this kind of content, please click like and subscribe and comment down below. Thanks for sticking around, I really do appreciate you watching these all the way to the end. And as ever, I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.